Well, the last time we saw something really new from Bell in the way of off-road helmets was back in 2015 when they brought out their Moto-9 Flex and Flex Carbon, which was their top-of-the-line helmet, around that $900, $950 sort of thing. So what we want to talk about today is the newest, latest and greatest from Bell. And not just because it's new, but because it's a really landmark new model, the Moto-10 Spherical. And notable for a number of reasons. You know, it really steps up in ventilation, in safety features, in the liner and a whole lot of things. In fact, incredibly, you know, the visor screws are the only things that carry over, you know, from its predecessor, the Moto Flex 9. But let's just put it in context a little bit, because I think a lot of people looked at this 10 and go, oh, therefore it supersedes the 9. So I think the important thing is to understand that the 9's still very much in the range, now called the Moto-9 Flex. You know, shell's obviously very similar, visor's a little bit different. You can sort of see here the EPS, that we'll talk about that a little bit later. So, you know, that helmet still sits in there. It has moved to a, you know, a fiberglass construction, so Bell's made sure they can keep a sub $1,000 helmet, but they've poured a huge amount of energy and resource into creating what is, you know, we think a pretty special helmet. Well, Moto-10 Spherical. So, you know, you're talking sort of, you know, $1,200 or $1,300, so it's a top-end helmet. So let's just sort of put that in perspective, you know, right off the bat. The really significant things is it's a full carbon shell. It has what they're calling a segregated construction. There's a bit of overlap there. We'll talk about it. Massive increase in ventilation and a new liner, and quite a significant different feel. So let's go to each of the features, right? So just to sort of understand this helmet, its predecessor, as we said, you know, the Moto-9 Flex, you know, came with three: an EPS, EPP, and an EPO liner. You know, so that which, you know, was designed to manage the low, medium, and large impacts incrementally based on those three different materials. You know, from an internal protection point of view, what the 10 comes with is the EPS, which is, you know, something that was patented, and I think, you know, it was a first in 1957. Bell were the first to use EPS liners, you know, in helmets, and an EPP, so one of those soft memory foams. So essentially what it is, and the reason it's called spherical, is because it's effectively a ball and socket design. So basically you've got that EPP liner, which is allowed to move inside the EPS. The EPS has now got a bit of a I guess a lubricating surface on it to allow that. And it's amazing how much it does move. You know, it's got sort of about 10 or 15 mil, or sometimes more, in each direction. It's held by a bunch of little tethers. So the idea of that, obviously, and I think, you know, designed in concert with MIPS, is to, you know, mitigate those rotational energy forces and the linears. So I think that, you know, it's fairly accepted science now that you know, that's the gold standard when it comes to you know, it comes to being able to look after your brain essentially in all sorts of different impacts. And look, you know, while we're talking protection, really interesting, and the difference between the 10 and the 9 is that this EPS, expanded polypropylene, is also brought down here. So when you have a crash, you know, it's basically you haven't got collateral damage. It's trying to avoid, you know, you busting your collarbone while you're at it. Interestingly too, like the 9, that EPS extends right down, you know, right down here to the chin piece. So, you know, really nice little addition there. So that's by way of external and internal production. The fit. You know, when we first put on the 9, I think they called it an adaptive fit. You've got those three liners. It was the first time I'd ever gone from a large to a medium helmet, because it seemed to form around your head so amazingly. So for me, that, you know, the Moto Flex 9 Flex was something that sort of set a new standard in terms of flex, in terms of comfort, I beg your pardon. But I think the Moto-10's outdone it, interestingly, because I've only got sort of two of those liners. But I think, you know, just in terms of, you know, the way it conforms to your head, I mean, obviously it's, you know, it depends very much on your head shape, etc. But we've tried this also in a medium size with a bunch of different crew, and, you know, the comfort level, you know, is pretty special. A lot of that has to do with the comfort liner. So, you know, there's several elements about this. Obviously, you know, the magnetic remove cheek pads make life a whole lot easier. Also, you know, great in an emergency, but just sort of simple, smart. You know, a very simple design, taking out the liner. Very easy, you know, to remove and wash. Interestingly, this year, the cheek pads actually extend, they come a little bit further forward. So I think that collectively just sort of houses your head a little bit better, just makes it feel a little bit more secure on the head, possibly to offset the fact that you've got that rotation element of the ball and socket design. And one of the really interesting things actually is that, you know, the liner material is infused, or I guess impregnated, you would say, with a recycled jade. So, might sound crazy, what have they got, jade, some sort of gemstone in there, but it's actually designed specifically to sort of cool your head down. So, you know, for the first time ever, I guess Bell's actually brought out something that, whereby, you know, I guess the liner becomes a performance element, you know, of the helmet. So that's pretty cool. So let's talk about ventilation. I think if you had to say that there was one big difference between the Moto-9 and Moto-10, it's the ventilation. I mean, simply looking at these ports here, you can sort of see it. The first time I wore a helmet, one of the 10s about a year ago with a pre-production helmet, you know, I went on an adventure ride, it was 0 degrees, and it was literally the wrong helmet to take. It was too cold, you know, because the ventilation, and that just reinforced for me how much ventilation it's got. But I think to really understand the ventilation system, it's got a lot to do not just with the fact that the ports are way bigger on the front here, but this, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, this segregated design. So you can almost flex this. You can see this layer that comes over the top. But you know, the ventilation in any helmet is only as good as, you know, you're able to exhaust it out the back. And you know, the level of the step up in ventilation, I just can't sort of stress it enough, between the 9 and the 10 is massive. This, to me, the 10 is the best ventilated helmet on the market, and by, you know, a pretty damn big margin. The visor, again, quite a bit of difference if you sort of just have a look at the, you know, the two visor designs between the 10, you know, and the 9. Quite a bit different, so it's got a distinctive look. Common to the two is the fact that it doesn't have a central, I think they call it a flying bridge, so there's no fastening element in the middle, which is actually intentional. Idea of it being, a lot of people look at it and go, shit, you keep feeling like you need to do the visor up more, and I've done that for years with Bell helmets. But it's, again, designed so you're not driving that, you know, if you have hit your head on the ground, you're not driving forces back through the middle of the head here. It's diverting it, deflecting off the edge, and then you've got a couple of lugs here. If you do have a big hit, it's designed to fly back. So the only thing, I guess, you know, from something to quibble about is that you don't have a lot of visor adjustment, you know, so you've really, essentially you've just got an elongated hole here and it rotates on that tab, and you've really only got from sort of there to there. So, you know, for fashion conscious young punks who are thinking about, you know, visors being something that accommodate your stickers or make you look good or run them at the right angle, not a problem. You know, the thing's a fashion statement, it's fantastic. I think if you're kind of an adventure guy for whom you're thinking of visors much more practical, riding into a setting sun, that lack of adjustment, you know, may be a little bit of an issue. Can't go a lot further without talking about the quality finish on the thing. I mean, this is an Eli Tomac replica, but the quality of the finish just everywhere is just, you know, second to none. It's pretty damn special. You know, I think, and that sort of comes down to also like the attention to detail. Little things like the fact that you've got, you know, a magnetic, you know, strap for your strap end there. Doesn't matter how cold your hands are, how big your gloves are, instead of dicking around here and getting an arm pump while you're doing it, it's just like bang, it's done, you know? Just an obvious thing. Similarly with the cheek pad. You know, on those cheek pads with the magnets, you can pull the helmet on and off 1,000 times, you know, those cheek pads won't come out. Also, and in a lot of ways, as you'd expect, eject ready, you know, because for you paying, you know, $1,000+ for a helmet, you know, you'd expect that. And I guess the other thing is it's, you know, this new Moto-10 Spherical comes also with a 2206 ECE 2206 standard, which, to my understanding, I think in June 2023 is something that's going to be mandated, or a standard that comes into effect in, you know, in some countries. I guess the other thing while we're talking about finishing touches is, you know, like a bag, pretty cool. You know, again, if you're going to get a helmet like that, you want to house it in a new bag. I'm pretty sure, I want to say a few years ago, it used to come with an extra visor as well, but the last couple of, the last Moto-10 we've got didn't come with a spare visor, but that'd be something, you know, that was nice. So, a lot of really positive things to say about this thing. Ventilation, top notch, amazing fit, you know, cool safety features, heaps of beautiful finishing touches. The only thing we can kind of quibble about, I guess, you know, the eye port is plenty wide enough for peripheral vision. And this was also a little bit of an issue, not so much an issue, but a case with the 9 Flex as well. Vertically, probably a little bit smaller than average, so it's not a biggie. You may have to take the nose guard off your goggles or off the helmet itself, just if you want that little bit of space, because sometimes, you know, it's a bit hard getting, depending on what kind of goggles you use and the size of their frame. That's not a biggie. The other thing we've noticed is that even though your head sits, relative to the 9 about 5mm further back, there's about 5mm more EPS at the front here. Even though your head sits further back, it's still, I don't want to say it's cramped in terms of around the chin piece, but it is sort of fairly close. So we sort of noticed on a few of those, a few of those days where it's wet and you're inclined to fog up, that can probably accentuate that a little bit. Pretty easy fix. You've got a really well ventilated grill here in the chin piece. It's just simply a matter of removing that once you do that piece of piss. So look, these helmets look very new, which they are. And I think obviously a part of a product evaluation has got very much to do with, what the thing is like after a fair way down the track. So this is actually one of the helmets that they brought out about a year ago. And the reason I mentioned that is because we've had the opportunity to, to run this now. With that liner, the antimicrobial, antibacterial liner, I literally don't think I've washed the liner in this for a year. So, it sounds good. It sounds like one of those features you read in a bullet point on a brochure, but what it actually means, it stops it getting crusty and skanky and stinky. And, and that I think is just sort of testament, looking at this helmet and the quality and everything. Nothing looks dog-eared, nothing's tired, nothing's worn. And in particular, the fact that liner, is now, I don't want to say as good as new, but pretty damn close. I think that's the best example of, for me, wearing a helmet for a year and not seeing things sort of deteriorate. So to try and sort of, wrap the whole thing up, what we're saying about it, I mean, we're talking about a really high-end helmet here. It's got the features, and some of the safety features in particular, in my mind, to justify it. I've had the luxury of being given helmets, as part of my gig in the industry, and I know it's easy for me to say, put your head in the best helmet on the market you possibly can, but it's really important to me, and I think it's worth every cent. I'll forego 3 sets of gear to pay an extra $500 for a helmet that's going to, look after my head. So the question for me in a lot of ways is like, and I guess you're talking about a sort of $400 difference between the Moto-9 Flex, Bell's Moto-9 Flex, 9S Flex, I keep wanting to get that, the new one, the fiberglass shell, and this sort of $1,200 or $1,300 10. How do you decide between the two? Well, I think if you're a kind of sweat-soaked racer and a pretty serious guy, like the 10's a no-brainer, if for no other reason than the added ventilation you get. But I think obviously there's all those extra safety features as well. If, however, you're a guy who's sort of more of a sort of trail guide, maybe uses your helmet to go, on some adventure rides, I think, as I said before, the excess of ventilation in the 10, I think you might want to sort of steer back toward the 9, which, you get, again, a magnificent helmet and save yourself a few hundred dollars along the way. But when you look at who's wearing these things, the Toby Prices, the Eli Tomacs of the world, it was interesting just, seeing Harry Bink and J.O. Archer, just the other day, triple backflipping, the first time that's been done for, in, 6 years since Sheeny did it, but the first time done live. Guess what those guys are wearing, these helmets. So, to me, I've always been a fan of a company. It's almost, I think it's just coming up to 70 years, Bell as a company, they make helmets, and that's what they're really good at. I think this Moto-10 Spherical, the latest and greatest, the new top-of-the-line thing, I think is going to be landmark with its ball and socket spherical design. I think it's, notching up yet another one of those firsts for a company that's super progressive, and, quite simply, I think that's currently the best helmet on the market, best off-road helmet on the market.